My name is Bethany. I'm 28 years old, and the night of my father's 60th birthday party was the night my entire world shattered into pieces. I stood there in my designer dress at this upscale waterfront restaurant, surrounded by 40 of our closest family and friends, when my mother rose from her seat during the toasts, pointed directly at me, and declared in front of everyone, "She's dead to us." The room went silent. Gasps echoed off the walls. My face burned as confusion flooded through me. I had no idea what I'd done. But then the restaurant door swung open with force, and a tall, imposing man in a dark suit walked in. Everyone turned. It was a bodyguard. My bodyguard, apparently. Someone I'd never seen before in my life. His name was Harrison. My mother's face drained of all color the moment she saw him. That's when I realized the announcement wasn't about what I thought at all. It was about what she was hiding. Before I dive into what happened next, I need to know, where are you watching from? Have you ever experienced a family betrayal that turned your life upside down? If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button right now and subscribe, because you're going to want to hear how this unfolds. Trust me, what my mother was hiding was worse than anything I could have imagined. The bodyguard's arrival was just the beginning of the most devastating night of my life. Let's get into it. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the life I thought I had. I grew up in an affluent suburban Connecticut family that everyone envied. My father, Douglas, had just turned 60. He was a successful hedge fund manager with a reputation that preceded him in every country club and boardroom in our area. My mother, Patricia, was 57, a former socialite who sat on the boards of 3 different charities and organized galas that raised hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. They were the kind of couple people pointed to as relationship goals. Elegant, powerful, untouchable. My younger brother Trevor was 25, a medical resident at a prestigious hospital in Manhattan. He was the golden child, following in the footsteps of our doctor grandfather. Then there was me, Yale Law graduate, associate at one of the top law firms in the state. Engaged to Graham, a corporate banker whose family was almost as well connected as ours. We were the picture-perfect American family, the kind you see in magazine spreads about successful people who have it all. I was especially close with my mother. We had lunch dates twice a month at her favorite bistro downtown. Shopping trips to New York City where we'd spend entire Saturdays browsing boutiques and getting our nails done. She was my confidant, or so I thought. I told her everything. My struggles at the firm, my wedding planning stress, my hopes for the future. She listened with what seemed like genuine care and always had advice that felt maternal and wise. The birthday party had been planned for months. Patricia insisted on this exclusive venue, a waterfront restaurant with a private room that overlooked the harbor. The sunset view was spectacular, and she decorated with elegant floral arrangements and soft lighting that made everyone look beautiful in photos. The guest list was carefully curated. Extended family, of course. My father's business associates. Friends from the country club. People whose opinions mattered in our social circle. I'd arrived 2 hours early to help with setup. I'd chosen my dress carefully. A midnight blue silk number that my mother had helped me pick out 3 weeks prior. I'd also spent considerable time selecting my father's gift, a vintage watch he'd mentioned admiring at an auction. Everything seemed normal during setup. My mother was directing the catering staff with her usual precision. My father was charming early arrivals with his trademark storytelling. But looking back now, there were signs. Small ones I'd dismissed at the time. My mother avoided eye contact during the pre-party photos we took as a family. She kept checking her phone anxiously, which wasn't like her. She usually insisted everyone put phones away during family events. When I asked if she was okay, she blamed it on party stress and waved me off with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. My brother Trevor's absence was noted but explained. He'd called that afternoon saying there was an emergency at the hospital and he'd be late. No one questioned it. He was a resident. Emergencies happened. Graham was by my side the entire evening, playing the role of charming future son-in-law. He made small talk with my father's colleagues, complimented my mother's event planning, and kept his hand on the small of my back in that possessive but affectionate way that made me feel secure. The room filled up. Champagne flowed. Appetizers circulated. Everyone was having a wonderful time. My father's brother Raymond was there with his wife. My mother's sister Diane came with her daughter Melinda, my favorite cousin. The energy was celebratory and warm. I remember thinking how lucky I was to be part of this family, to have this foundation of love and success beneath me. I had no idea I was standing on quicksand. The toasts began around 8:30, right after the main course was cleared. My father stood first, as planned. He thanked everyone for coming, made a joke about getting old, and raised his glass to another year of health and prosperity. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. It was perfect, scripted, but in that comfortable way that family traditions often are. Then my mother stood up. That wasn't part of the plan. She wasn't supposed to give a toast, but she rose from her seat, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and reached for the microphone my father had just set down. Her hand was shaking. I noticed that immediately. Her face was flushed, almost fever-bright under the soft lighting. My father looked at her with surprise, but didn't stop her. "I need to say something," she announced to the room. Her voice came through the speakers with an edge I'd never heard before. Sharp, almost frantic. "There's something I need to say. Something I should have said years ago." The room quieted. People set down their glasses. I felt Graham's hand tighten on mine under the table. Something about her tone sent warning signals through my body, but I couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. Then she turned and pointed directly at me. Her finger was shaking. "My daughter," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "The one I raised, the one I sacrificed everything for, the one I gave my whole life to." I felt my face start to burn. Everyone was staring at me now. What was happening? Was this some kind of surprise tribute? But her tone didn't match that. There was something bitter in it. Something angry. "She's dead to us," my mother said clearly into the microphone. "As of tonight, she is no longer part of this family." The room exploded with gasps. Murmurs rippled through the 40 guests like a shockwave. I felt the floor drop out from under me. My vision tunneled. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of joke. A terrible, awful joke. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. "Mom, what are you talking about?" My voice came out higher than normal, confused and hurt. My father looked completely blindsided. He stood as well, reaching for my mother's arm. "Patricia, what are you doing? What is this?" But she pulled away from him, still gripping the microphone. "She's destroyed everything we built, everything we stand for, everything we've worked our entire lives to create." "I don't understand," I said, and I genuinely didn't. My mind was racing through the past weeks, months, trying to figure out what I could have possibly done. Had I said something that offended her? Made some decision she disagreed with? But nothing rose to the level of this. Nothing could justify this public humiliation. "Mom, please," I tried again. "What did I do?" "You know exactly what you did," she spat back, and there were actual tears running down her face now. But they looked like angry tears, desperate tears. Graham stood beside me, his arm around my waist. Mrs. Montgomery, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. Whatever this is, maybe we should discuss it privately. This doesn't concern you, Graham, my mother snapped. This is family business. This is about blood and loyalty and trust. My Aunt Diane stood up from her table. Patricia, honey, maybe you should sit down. You're not making sense. My Uncle Raymond's voice boomed across the room. Someone better explain what the hell is going on right now. The other guests were pulling out their phones now. I saw the screens glowing as people started texting, probably posting on social media. The Montgomery family drama was about to become public knowledge in real time. My legal career flashed before my eyes. My firm valued discretion and reputation above almost everything else. How would this scandal affect my standing there? My mother opened her mouth to continue, her eyes wild and desperate, when the restaurant door suddenly swung open with such force it banged against the wall. Everyone turned. A man walked in. He was tall, easily 6'3", with a build that suggested serious time in the gym and serious training in something physical. He wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored, with an earpiece visible in his right ear. His eyes scanned the room with professional precision, the kind of assessment someone makes when they're evaluating threats and exits. Then his gaze locked directly on my mother. The color drained from Patricia's face so fast, I thought she might faint. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her hand dropped from the microphone with a dull thud as it hit the table. The man walked directly toward our family table at the front of the room. His footsteps were measured and deliberate. No one spoke. The tension was suffocating. My father stepped slightly in front of my mother, a protective instinct kicking in. "Who the hell are you?" Douglas demanded. "This is a private event." The man stopped about 10 feet from our table. He reached into his jacket pocket, and I saw several guests flinch, but he pulled out a folded document, not a weapon. He held it out toward my father. "I'm Harrison Caldwell. I'm Miss Montgomery's security detail." I felt my stomach drop. "What? I don't have a security detail." Harrison's eyes flicked to me briefly. Acknowledgement, but not explanation, before returning to my father. Douglas took the document with shaking hands and unfolded it. As he read, his face went from angry red to pale white in seconds. I watched his jaw clench and unclench. "This is a protective order," he said quietly. But in the silent room, everyone heard it. Someone made threats against Bethany. The room erupted again. Shocked voices overlapped. I heard my name repeated dozens of times in tones ranging from concern to morbid curiosity. Graham's arm tightened around me. "Threats? What threats?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Harrison turned fully toward me now. His expression was professional but not unkind. 16 documented incidents over the past 3 weeks, Miss Montgomery. Your tires were slashed in your parking garage. Your apartment was broken into 2 weeks ago. You've received threatening emails sent directly to your law firm's server. My mind reeled. Those things had happened, but I'd thought they were random, bad luck. The tires, I blamed on vandalism. The break-in, nothing had been stolen, so I assumed it was kids or someone looking for drug money who got spooked. The emails had gone to spam, and my IT department told me it was just standard internet harassment that happened to lawyers sometimes. "Connected?" I managed to ask. "They're all connected?" "Yes," Harrison said firmly. "All of them began approximately 4 weeks ago. All targeting you specifically, all escalating in severity." Graham looked at me with hurt in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me about these things?" "I didn't think they mattered," I said honestly. "I thought I was being paranoid connecting them." Harrison's expression hardened slightly. "They're very much connected, Miss Montgomery. And they all started exactly 1 week after you were approached by a private investigator named Victoria Hayes." My father's hands were still shaking as he continued reading the document Harrison had given him. The protective order was official, stamped and signed. I could see legal letterhead from across the table. Douglas looked up at Harrison, then at me, then at my mother, who had sunk back into her chair and was staring at the table. "This says the threats have been traced back to our social circle," my father said slowly. "To someone with intimate knowledge of Bethany's schedule and habits." Harrison nodded once, sharp and professional. "Correct. Whoever targeted your daughter knew her routines. Her parking garage access code was used to gain entry when her tires were slashed. The person knew she works late on Thursdays. The break-in at her apartment happened when they knew she'd be at a client dinner." I felt cold spreading through my chest. How would anyone know those things? "Someone very close to you," Harrison said. "Or someone hired by someone very close to you." The implications hung in the air like poison gas. Graham's face had gone hard. "You're saying this was personal, intentional, not random at all?" "Nothing about this was random," Harrison confirmed. He pulled out a slim tablet from his other jacket pocket and tapped it a few times. "The threatening emails were sent through a VPN, but the IP address traces back to a location within 3 miles of this restaurant. The break-in at your apartment was executed by someone who had a copy of your building's security codes, which are only held by residents and management. Your tires were slashed with a specific tool that's used primarily by automotive professionals." My mind was spinning. But why? Why would anyone do this? "Because you were getting too close to something they wanted to stay hidden," Harrison said. He looked directly at my mother when he said it. "I think you need to explain exactly what you're talking about," my Uncle Raymond said loudly from his table. "Right now. No more cryptic statements." Harrison's jaw tightened, but he nodded. 4 weeks ago, Miss Montgomery was approached by Victoria Hayes, a private investigator and former FBI agent. Miss Hayes had information about irregularities in the Montgomery family trust funds, specifically in Bethany's trust fund, which is managed by her father, Douglas. The room went completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Douglas's face went from white to red. "That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. My daughter's trust is perfectly intact." "No, sir, it's not," Harrison said calmly. "Miss Hayes has documentation showing that approximately $800,000 was transferred out of Bethany's trust fund over a period of 6 months, starting 2 years ago. The money was moved through a series of shell companies and eventually deposited into offshore accounts connected to your hedge fund." I thought I might throw up. $800,000. My trust fund. The money my grandparents had left me. The financial security I'd always known was there as a safety net. Gone. "That's not possible," I heard myself say. "I get quarterly statements. Everything always looks normal." Harrison's expression softened just slightly when he looked at me. "The statements were falsified, Miss Montgomery. Someone with access to the trust account information has been sending you fraudulent reports for 2 years." My mother made a small sound, almost like a whimper. Everyone's eyes snapped to her. She had her face in her hands now, shoulders shaking. "Patricia?" My father's voice was dangerous now. "Patricia, what did you do?" "I need you to understand," Harrison continued, his voice cutting through the tension, "that Miss Hayes approached Bethany with this information 4 weeks ago. She met with her at a coffee shop near her law firm. She showed her preliminary evidence and left her with a complete file of documentation." I remembered that meeting now. It had seemed so strange at the time. A woman I'd never met asking to speak with me privately. She'd been professional but intense. She'd told me there were problems with my family's finances. I'd been skeptical, defensive even. My family was wealthy and successful. The idea that something could be wrong seemed absurd. But she'd left me with a file. A thick manila envelope that I'd taken home and shoved in my desk drawer. I'd been too scared to open it, too worried about what it might say. I'd told myself I'd look at it when I had time, when I felt ready. I never did. When did the threats start? Graham asked, his lawyer brain obviously making connections. Approximately 1 week after that initial meeting, Harrison said. Someone knew Bethany had been contacted. Someone knew she had that file. And someone wanted to scare her away from investigating further. I looked at my mother, and she slowly raised her head. Our eyes met across the table, and I saw something in her expression that made my blood run cold. Guilt. Absolute guilt. You knew, I whispered. You knew about the missing money. Patricia's face crumpled. I can explain. Please, Bethany, I can explain everything. Then explain, my Uncle Raymond demanded. Explain right now in front of all of us. But before my mother could speak, Harrison held up one hand. There's more you need to know. The investigation didn't stop with Bethany's trust fund. Miss Hayes discovered that money was also taken from Trevor's trust, $600,000, and from Patricia's own inheritance account, $500,000. Nearly $2 million total, moved through Douglas's hedge fund over a 2-year period. Douglas staggered backward like he'd been physically struck. $2 million? That's impossible. I would never. Your signature is on the transfer authorizations, Harrison said, producing more documents from his jacket. Miss Hayes has copies of everything. Then where's the money? My Aunt Diane asked, her voice shrill. If $2 million was moved, where did it go? That's the question, isn't it? Harrison said grimly. Miss Hayes hired me 3 weeks ago when the threats against Bethany escalated. My job was to protect her and to help investigate where the money went. And I found some very interesting answers. He tapped his tablet again. Douglas's hedge fund suffered major losses in late 2023. Market volatility hit hard. Several major clients were threatening to pull their investments, which would have collapsed the entire fund. The Montgomery family's reputation and lifestyle were at risk. My father was shaking his head. I had losses. Every fund manager had losses that quarter, but I recovered. We're fine now. You recovered by using your children's money, Harrison said bluntly, and your wife's inheritance. You propped up the fund with family assets to keep clients from fleeing. It's a classic desperate move. And it would be one thing if you'd asked permission, but you didn't. You just took it. I didn't take anything, Douglas protested, but his voice lacked conviction now. Then maybe you should ask your wife who actually moved the money, Harrison said, looking at Patricia. Because the computer trail shows the transfers were initiated from your home office, Mrs. Montgomery. From your personal computer. On dates and times when Douglas was confirmed to be at his office in the city. Every eye in the room turned to my mother. She looked like a cornered animal, desperate, terrified, caught. And that's when she finally started talking. The silence in the room was suffocating. My mother sat with her head in her hands for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. When she finally looked up, her perfectly applied makeup was streaked with tears. And she looked older than I'd ever seen her. Broken. I did it to protect us, she whispered. Then louder, voice cracking. I did it to protect this family. My father took a step toward her. Patricia, what are you saying? What did you do? She laughed, but it was a hollow, bitter sound. What did I do? I saved us, Douglas. I saved everything you built, everything we are. By stealing from our children, Douglas's voice rose. By taking their security? It was supposed to be temporary, Patricia's voice broke into a sob. It was supposed to be a loan. We were going to pay it back within 6 months. You promised me we'd pay it back. The confession poured out of her then, and I watched my entire understanding of my family disintegrate word by word. 2 years ago, in late 2023, Douglas's hedge fund had taken catastrophic losses. It wasn't just bad luck or market forces. Several of his major investment strategies had failed simultaneously. Clients were panicking. The fund was hemorrhaging assets as people pulled their money out. Within weeks, the entire operation was on the verge of collapse. You came to me, Patricia said, looking at Douglas with something between love and hatred. You came to me and said we needed capital immediately. You said if we could just stabilize for a few months, you could turn it around. You said the losses were temporary. Douglas's face was ashen. I asked you to look into a line of credit. I suggested maybe selling the vacation house. That wouldn't have been enough, Patricia shouted. You needed millions, not thousands. The vacation house would have brought in maybe $400,000 after the mortgage was paid off. That wasn't going to save the fund. It wasn't going to save our life. So you decided to steal from our children instead, I said, my voice cold and unfamiliar even to my own ears. Patricia flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't steal. I borrowed. There's a difference. Not when the people you're borrowing from don't know about it, Graham interjected. He was using his lawyer voice now, clinical and sharp. That's embezzlement, Mrs. Montgomery. That's fraud. My mother ignored him, her eyes fixed on me. Your trust fund had $800,000 just sitting there. Trevor's had $600,000. My inheritance account had $500,000 that I'd never touched. All of it was just sitting in accounts doing nothing while our entire life was about to collapse. It was our future, I said, my voice shaking. That money was supposed to be for emergencies, for buying a house, for starting a family. It was supposed to be there. And it would have been, Patricia insisted. Douglas promised me the fund would recover. He had new strategies, new investments. He said by mid-2024 we'd have made back everything and more. But that didn't happen, did it? Harrison's voice cut through the room. Because the fund's performance records show continued losses through most of 2024. Whatever strategies Mr. Montgomery implemented didn't work. Douglas had collapsed into a chair now, his head in his hands. The market didn't cooperate. Some of the new positions went bad. I tried, Patricia. God knows I tried. So the money's gone, my Uncle Raymond said flatly. $2 million just absorbed into a failing fund. It went to client payouts, Harrison confirmed. When clients demanded their money back, that's where it came from. Your family's assets were used to make other investors whole while the fund continued to spiral. And you knew, I said to my mother. You knew the money was gone and you just kept lying to us. Patricia's face was a mask of misery. What was I supposed to do? Tell you we'd lost everything? Watch our family's reputation destroyed? Watch everything we built crumble? So you doctored our statements, I said. The pieces fitting together now. You sent us fake quarterly reports showing our trusts were fine. I handled all the family administrative work, Patricia admitted. I always had. The account statements came to our house. It was easy to create new ones using the old templates. I just changed the numbers. You never checked the actual accounts. Neither did Trevor. You both just trusted the statements I forwarded. The betrayal was so massive I couldn't fully process it. My own mother, the woman who raised me, who I told everything, who I trusted completely. She'd been lying to my face for 2 years. But why the threats? My Aunt Diane asked. Why terrorize your own daughter? Patricia's voice dropped to a whisper. When Victoria Hayes approached Bethany, I panicked. I'd been so careful. But somehow she found out. She had documents, evidence. I knew if Bethany started investigating, everything would come out. So you tried to scare her away, Harrison said. You hired someone to make her think she was in danger, to make her too frightened to dig into her finances. I hired a man, Patricia confessed. Someone from the city. Someone who said he could handle these things discreetly. I just wanted Bethany to be afraid enough to stop asking questions. I never wanted her actually hurt. You slashed my tires, I said, my voice hollow. You had someone break into my apartment. You terrorized me for weeks. I was trying to protect you, Patricia cried. If the truth came out, it would destroy our family. Your father would go to prison. We'd lose everything. Your career would be tainted by association. I was trying to save all of us. By abusing your own daughter? Graham's voice was ice. That's how you justify it? Douglas finally looked up, and there were tears streaming down his face. I didn't know about the statements, Bethany. I swear to God I didn't know Patricia was sending you fake reports. I thought you knew about the money. I thought Patricia had told you. Liar, Patricia spat at him. Don't you dare pretend you're innocent in this. I'm not innocent, Douglas said quietly. I made terrible business decisions. I should have shut the fund down when the losses started. I should have faced the consequences. But I never asked you to steal from our children, Patricia. I never asked you to lie to them for years. You didn't have to ask, Patricia screamed. You just had to be a failure. You just had to come to me with your problems and expect me to fix them like I always do. The room watched this implosion in stunned silence. The perfect Montgomery marriage, the foundation of our perfect Montgomery family, was revealed as rotten at its core. And then my Uncle Raymond asked the question that made everything so much worse. Where's Trevor? He said quietly. Does Trevor know about any of this? Watching my mother's face drain of what little color remained was answer enough. But Harrison was the one who spoke. Trevor Montgomery is currently at JFK Airport, he said, pulling up his tablet again. He booked a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands approximately 4 hours ago. His flight is currently boarding. My brother, my baby brother, the golden child, he was running. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't quite exploded yet. Graham pulled his phone out immediately. I'll call him. I'll get him to come back. He won't answer, Harrison said calmly, his fingers moving across his tablet screen. He turned his phone off 30 minutes ago, right after he went through security. He's not coming back, Mr. Reynolds. My father stood up so fast his chair fell backward with a crash. What are you talking about? Why would Trevor run? This is about Patricia and me, not him. Actually, Harrison said, still looking at his tablet, it's very much about Trevor. He's known about the missing money for 3 months. I felt like I'd been hit in the chest. 3 months? He's known for 3 months and never said anything? He did more than just know about it, Harrison continued, and his voice had taken on a harder edge. He hired his own forensic accountant back in July, a specialist in financial fraud. Trevor discovered not just the missing trust funds, but a much bigger problem. Douglas's face went from pale to gray. What bigger problem? Harrison looked up from his tablet, his eyes cold. Your fund has been operating as a Ponzi scheme for the past 18 months, Mr. Montgomery. Maybe not intentionally at first, but that's what it became. You were using new investor money to pay returns to existing investors while your actual investment positions were underwater. The room erupted, voices shouting over each other. My Aunt Diane was crying. My Uncle Raymond was on his phone, presumably calling his lawyer. Other guests were backing toward the exits, wanting to distance themselves from the scandal unfolding before them. That's not true, Douglas protested weakly. I had legitimate positions, real investments. You had some legitimate positions, Harrison corrected. But you also had massive losses you were hiding from your clients. When people wanted to withdraw funds, you used capital from new investors to pay them out. That's textbook Ponzi behavior, whether you meant it to be or not. How do you know all this? I asked Harrison, my legal mind trying to keep up even as my personal world collapsed. Because Trevor's forensic accountant sent me his full report, Harrison said. After Trevor found out what I was investigating, we compared notes. When? My father whispered. When did Trevor find out? July 15th, Harrison said precisely. He was helping your wife organize some paperwork for your accountant, Mrs. Montgomery. He noticed discrepancies in the trust fund statements. Being a detail-oriented person, he started digging. Within a week, he'd figured out the entire scheme. Patricia had her face in her hands again, sobbing. He promised me he wouldn't tell anyone. He promised. He promised to keep quiet, Harrison confirmed, for a price. The words settled over the room like a layer of ice. My Uncle Raymond stopped his phone call. Graham's hand tightened on my shoulder. I couldn't breathe. What price? I managed to ask. Harrison pulled up a new screen on his tablet. Bank records from a previously undisclosed account in Trevor's name. Patricia made 4 deposits over the past 2 months. $30,000, $50,000, $40,000, and $30,000 again this morning. Total of $150,000. I looked at my mother in horror. You gave him money to stay quiet? He was going to tell everyone, Patricia cried. He was going to go to the authorities. He was going to destroy everything. So you bribed your own son, Graham said, disgust dripping from every word. I gave him what he asked for, Patricia said bitterly. He said he needed money to start over somewhere new. He said this family was toxic and he wanted nothing to do with us. He said if I gave him enough to leave and build a new life, he'd keep our secrets. Where did you get that money? Douglas demanded. We don't have $150,000 in liquid assets. Patricia laughed, that same hollow, broken sound. I've been selling things, Douglas, for months now. My jewelry. Some of the art pieces from the house. That antique furniture collection your mother left us. I've been liquidating everything I could get my hands on that wouldn't be immediately noticed. You've been stealing from the estate, too, my Uncle Raymond said flatly. Jesus Christ, Patricia. And Trevor took the money and ran, I said, still trying to process the depth of my brother's betrayal. He extorted our mother and then left me to deal with all of this alone. Not quite, Harrison said. Trevor actually had bigger plans than just taking the $150,000. He tapped his tablet again and pulled up what looked like account records. Your brother has been moving money out of various Montgomery family accounts for the past 6 weeks. Small amounts. $5,000 here, $3,000 there. Never enough to trigger automatic fraud alerts, but it adds up. He's pulled approximately $80,000 additional dollars from accounts he had access to through your parents. That's why he was helping with the paperwork, Graham realized. He was using the access to steal. Correct, Harrison confirmed. Trevor has been planning his escape very carefully. The Cayman Islands don't have an extradition treaty with the United States for financial crimes under certain thresholds. He's been researching how to disappear. I felt numb. My brother, who I'd played with as children, who I'd helped through college, who I'd celebrated with when he got into medical school. He'd known for 3 months that our parents were destroying our futures, and instead of warning me or helping me, he'd used it as leverage to fund his own escape. There's one more thing, Harrison said, and I didn't think I could take one more thing. Trevor's forensic accountant discovered that your mother, Mrs. Montgomery, has been skimming money from the fund's operational accounts as well. Douglas's head snapped up. What? Small amounts over a long period of time, Harrison explained. Approximately 5 years. She's taken roughly $200,000 from the fund's operational expenses. Money that should have gone to overhead and staff salaries. I needed it, Patricia shouted. Your precious fund wasn't generating enough to maintain our lifestyle anymore, Douglas. The country club fees alone are $30,000 a year. Your car lease is $1,800 a month. The house maintenance, the charity galas, all of it costs money. Money we didn't have because you were losing everything. So you stole it, I said. From the clients. From us. From everyone. I maintained our family's position, Patricia said, and there was a manic edge to her voice now. I made sure we still looked successful even when we were failing. Because if people knew we were struggling, they'd pull their investments faster. They'd destroy us. I saved us by maintaining the illusion. You destroyed us by lying, I corrected. About everything. For years. My Uncle Raymond walked over to our table, his phone in his hand. I've called my attorney and the SEC hotline. There are investigators on their way here right now. Douglas, Patricia, I suggest you both stop talking immediately and lawyer up. My father looked at his brother with betrayed eyes. Ray, we're family. Family doesn't steal from family, Raymond said coldly. My retirement account was invested in your fund, Doug. Was that money stolen too? Was anything you told me true? Douglas couldn't answer. He just sat there, broken and silent. I stood up, my legs shaky. I need air. I need to get out of here. Harrison moved immediately to follow me. I'll escort you out, Miss Montgomery. As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. Family members shouting, someone crying, the sound of chairs scraping as people rushed to leave before the authorities arrived. The perfect birthday party had become a crime scene, and my mother's voice rising above it all. Bethany, please! You have to understand. I did this for you. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. Because the woman who'd raised me, who I'd loved and trusted, was dead to me now, just like she'd declared I was dead to her, except her death was permanent. I made it outside before my legs gave out. The cool evening air hit my face, and I realized I was crying. Not sobbing, just tears streaming silently down my face. I sat on a bench near the restaurant's entrance, my designer dress suddenly feeling like a costume for a role I'd never audition for again. Harrison stood a respectful distance away, watching the parking lot and entrance with professional vigilance. After a few minutes of silence, I looked up at him. Who are you really? And don't tell me you're just a bodyguard. He hesitated, then walked over and sat on the opposite end of the bench. My name is Harrison Caldwell. That part is true, and I am trained in executive protection. But you're right that there's more to it. Tell me, I said. I was done with secrets and lies. Harrison took a breath. I'm former FBI, White Collar Crimes Division. Worked there for 12 years before I retired 2 years ago. Since then, I've been doing private security work, mostly for corporate executives who need protection during sensitive business dealings. But that's not why you're here, I said. No, he admitted. I'm here because this case is personal. He pulled out his phone and opened the photo app. After scrolling for a moment, he turned it toward me. The image showed a woman, probably in her late 60s, with kind eyes and graying hair. She wore a lanyard around her neck with an ID badge. Behind her was a classroom with children's artwork on the walls. That's my sister, Margaret, Harrison said quietly. She was a third-grade teacher for 35 years, never married, dedicated her whole life to education. She lived modestly, saved carefully, and built up a retirement account of about $340,000. I felt my stomach drop. Your sister invested with my father. 5 years ago, Harrison confirmed. Douglas gave a presentation at her school district about retirement planning. He was charming, professional, showed charts and graphs about consistent returns. Margaret trusted him. She moved her entire retirement fund into his hedge fund. And she lost it all, I whispered. Every penny, Harrison said, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. When the fund started having problems, Douglas paid out the bigger investors first. The ones who could make noise. The ones with lawyers. My sister's account was in the second tier. By the time she tried to withdraw her money, there was nothing left. I'm so sorry, I said, and meant it. Margaret died 6 months ago, Harrison continued. Heart attack, the death certificate said. But I know better. She'd been working 2 jobs trying to rebuild her savings. At 68 years old, she was teaching during the day and working retail at night. The stress killed her. I watched him swipe to another photo. This one showed Margaret in a hospital bed, looking frail and tired. I took this 2 days before she died. She was still worried about money, still trying to figure out how she'd survive. She felt like a failure, like she'd wasted her entire life. She wasn't a failure, I said firmly. She was robbed. Yes, Harrison agreed. She was. And I've been investigating your father's fund ever since, trying to find a way to hold him accountable. That's when you met Victoria, I realized. Harrison nodded. Victoria Hayes and I worked together at the Bureau. She was one of the best investigators I ever met. When she retired, she went private. 3 months ago, I contacted her with what I had on Douglas. She told me she'd been hired by another victim's family to investigate the same fund. We joined forces. So this whole thing, I said slowly, the Bodyguard appearance tonight, the dramatic timing, all of it was planned. We needed leverage, Harrison admitted. We had evidence of fraud, but we needed Patricia to confess in front of witnesses. Someone who couldn't afford high-priced lawyers to bury the truth. We knew she was the weak link. So you used me, I said, anger starting to replace the numbness. You scared me. You let me think I was being stalked. The threats against you were real, Harrison said firmly. Patricia really did hire someone to intimidate you. Those incidents genuinely happened. What we did was make sure you were actually protected while also putting pressure on your parents. We fed Patricia information that made her believe you were getting closer to discovering the truth. How? I asked. Victoria has contacts at financial institutions, Harrison explained. We made sure certain inquiries about the trust funds got back to people we knew would tell Patricia. We created the impression that you were investigating much more aggressively than you actually were. I wasn't investigating at all, I admitted. I was too scared to even open the file Victoria gave me. We know, Harrison said gently. That's why we had to escalate. We knew that if Patricia felt cornered enough, publicly humiliated enough, she'd confess to try to control the narrative. And we needed that confession to happen in front of family and witnesses. At my father's birthday party, I said bitterly. It was the perfect venue, Harrison said. Extended family, business associates, people who knew your parents' lifestyle and reputation. When Patricia announced you were dead to the family, we knew she was on the edge. All I had to do was walk in with the protective order documentation, and she'd crack. You manipulated everything, I said. Yes, Harrison admitted. We did. And I'm not going to apologize for it because it worked. Your mother just confessed to fraud and embezzlement in front of 40 witnesses. Your father's Ponzi scheme is about to be exposed. The victims, including my sister's estate, finally have a chance at some kind of justice. I understood his motivations. I even agreed with his goals. But sitting there, realizing I'd been used as a pawn in someone else's investigation, stung. "I protected you," Harrison said, as if reading my thoughts. "Every step of the way, you were safe. The man Patricia hired to scare you? We had him under surveillance from day one. We have video evidence of everything he did, which means Patricia's going to face criminal charges, not just civil ones. The break-in at your apartment? I was in the building. He never got close to actually hurting you. But you let me be afraid," I said. "Yes," Harrison admitted, "because we needed the pressure on your family to build. And I'm sorry for that. But Bethany, there are 17 families who lost everything to your father's fund. 17 families who trusted him with their futures. 17 Margarets out there who deserve justice." I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He'd lost his sister, someone he loved, and he'd spent the past 6 months of his life making sure the people responsible would face consequences. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "Now the SEC takes over," Harrison said. "Possibly the FBI. Victoria's inside right now, making sure no one destroys evidence. The documents I gave your father include warrants to seize records. By morning, every financial transaction your parents have made in the past 5 years will be under federal review." "My career," I said suddenly. "Oh God, my law firm. When this hits the news." "You're a victim too," Harrison reminded me. "Your trust fund was stolen. You had no knowledge of the fraud. Any decent firm will recognize that. But I wasn't so sure. The legal world was small and reputation was everything. The daughter of a man running a Ponzi scheme? Even if I was innocent, the stain would follow me." "And Trevor?" I asked. "What happens to him?" "There's already a warrant being issued for his arrest," Harrison said, checking his phone. "Victoria's been coordinating with federal prosecutors all evening. Trevor won't make it out of JFK. They'll detain him before his flight leaves." "Good," I said, and surprised myself with the venom in my voice. He knew. For months he knew, and he used it to extort money and plan his escape while leaving me completely in the dark. "Family," Harrison said bitterly, "doesn't always mean what we think it should." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Through the restaurant windows, I could see chaos. Police had arrived. People were being interviewed. My mother was sitting with her head in her hands while an officer took notes. My father was on his phone, presumably calling the very expensive lawyer he was going to need. "Your sister," I said finally. "Margaret, tell me about her." Harrison's expression softened. "She was the best person I knew, patient, kind. She believed in helping kids who came from nothing, giving them the education and support to make something of themselves. Half her salary every year went to buying supplies for students whose families couldn't afford them." "She sounds wonderful," I said. "She was," Harrison agreed. "And she died thinking she'd failed. Thinking she was stupid for trusting the wrong person with her money. I couldn't let that stand. I couldn't let your father and mother just keep living their perfect life while Margaret's memory was tainted with shame." "I'm glad you're getting justice for her," I said, and meant it. "I'm sorry I was part of the family that hurt her." "You're not responsible for their choices," Harrison said firmly. "Any more than I'm responsible for my parents disowning Margaret when she married someone they didn't approve of. We don't choose our families. We only choose how we respond to what they do." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Now that the investigation is wrapping up?" "Stay until the trial," Harrison said. "Make sure the prosecutors have everything they need. Victoria and I have been building this case carefully. We want to make sure it sticks." "And then?" I pressed. Then I go home, Harrison said. Back to my regular work. Try to move on. Though I don't think I'll ever fully move on from losing Margaret. I don't think I'll ever fully move on from tonight, I admitted. No, Harrison agreed. You probably won't. But you'll build something new, something honest. That's what you do when the foundation you thought you had turns out to be rotten. You find solid ground and start over. I looked at him, this stranger who'd protected me, and used me, and ultimately given me the truth about my family. Thank you, I said, for keeping me safe, even if I didn't know I needed it. You're welcome, Harrison said simply. My phone buzzed. It was Graham. Beth, where are you? We need to talk. I looked at the message and sighed. I think my engagement just ended too. The banker? Harrison asked. He knew, I said. He works at the bank that handles my father's fund accounts. He saw suspicious activity 6 months ago and never told me. Because he was protecting his own career, Harrison guessed. Exactly, I confirmed. Which means I can't trust him either. I'm sorry, Harrison said, and he sounded genuine. Don't be, I said, surprising myself. Better to know now than after the wedding. We sat there together, two people who'd lost things we couldn't get back, watching my family's empire crumble through a restaurant window. And somehow, in that moment, I didn't feel quite as alone as I should have. The flashing lights of police cars painted the parking lot in alternating red and blue. I watched through the window as my mother was led out of the restaurant. She wasn't in handcuffs yet, just being escorted by officers for questioning, but the humiliation on her face was visible even from a distance. She caught sight of me sitting outside, and her face crumpled. She tried to call out, but an officer guided her firmly toward a patrol car. Graham emerged from the restaurant and spotted me immediately. He walked over quickly, his suit jacket off and his tie loosened. He looked rattled in a way I'd never seen before. Graham was always composed, always professional. Right now, he looked like he'd aged 5 years in one evening. Beth, we need to leave, he said urgently. The press is going to be here any minute. Someone inside already posted about this on social media. It's blowing up. Let it blow up, I said calmly. I'm done hiding from things. You can't mean that, Graham said, crouching down to my eye level. This is going to be a media circus. Your father running a Ponzi scheme? Your mother embezzling? This is career-ending scandal. For them, I corrected. Not for me. Beth, you're a Montgomery, Graham said, and there was something in his tone that made my spine stiffen. Like it or not, their scandal is your scandal. You have to think about damage control. About your firm. About us. Us, I repeated. Right. Let's talk about us, Graham. He looked wary. What do you mean? You knew, I said flatly. Harrison said you work at the bank that handles my father's fund accounts. You saw suspicious activity 6 months ago. Graham's face went pale. Beth, I can explain. Can you? I pulled the engagement ring off my finger. It was a beautiful 2-carat diamond in a platinum setting. We'd spent weeks choosing it together. Now it felt like a weight I couldn't wait to put down. Explain how you knew my family was defrauding people and you said nothing? I didn't know for sure, Graham protested. There were just some flags in the account activity. Things that looked unusual. But that doesn't always mean fraud. It could have been legitimate transactions. But you suspected, I pressed. You suspected enough that it bothered you, and you never told me. What was I supposed to say? Graham's voice rose slightly. Hey, Beth, I think your dad might be committing crimes? With no proof? Based on suspicions? Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what you should have said. Because I'm supposed to be your partner, your future wife. And partners don't keep secrets like that. I was trying to protect you, Graham said, but there was a hollowness to the words now. Everyone keeps saying that, I said bitterly. My mother said it. You're saying it. But what you all mean is you were protecting yourselves. My mother was protecting her lifestyle, and you were protecting your career. Graham's jaw tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? I held out the ring to him. You saw suspicious activity in my father's accounts, and you didn't report it. You didn't tell me. You didn't tell anyone. Because if you'd filed a formal report with your compliance department, there would have been scrutiny on you, on whether you'd been negligent, on whether you'd been involved. I wasn't involved, Graham said quickly. Too quickly. But you were scared people would think you were, I said. So you stayed quiet and let me walk around completely blind to the fact that my family was imploding. You let me keep trusting them, keep defending them. Beth, please. Graham reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Don't do this. Not now. Not when everything else is falling apart. Especially now, I corrected. Because right now I'm seeing everyone clearly for the first time. And what I see when I look at you is someone who chose his career security over honesty with me. Someone who would rather let me be hurt by the truth later than risk inconvenience by telling me earlier. That's not who I am, Graham protested. Then who are you? I asked, because I thought I knew. I thought you were honest and principled. But you kept something this massive from me for 6 months, Graham. 6 months. I thought there might be an explanation, Graham said weakly. I thought maybe I was wrong. You weren't wrong, I said. And deep down you knew you weren't wrong. You just hoped that if you ignored it long enough, it would go away or someone else would deal with it. Graham took the ring from my hand slowly. He looked at it for a long moment, then back at me. So that's it? We're done? We're done, I confirmed. I can't marry someone I can't trust, Graham. And I can't trust you anymore. You're making a mistake, Graham said, and now there was anger creeping into his voice. You're going to need support through this. Legal support, financial support. You think you can handle what's coming alone? I'd rather be alone than with someone who lies, I said simply. Graham stood up, pocketing the ring. Fine. I hope you figure out how to pay your rent when your trust fund is gone and your law firm fires you for being associated with a scandal. I hope being self-righteous keeps you warm at night. He walked away without looking back, and I felt nothing. No regret, no second thoughts. Just a strange sense of clarity. In one night, I'd lost my parents, my brother, and my fiancé. But I'd gained something too, the truth. I turned back to the restaurant windows. Through the glass, I could see my Uncle Raymond talking to investigators. My Aunt Diane was crying while being comforted by her daughter Melinda. Other family members were giving statements, their faces shocked and betrayed. That could have gone better, Harrison observed from his position a few feet away. Actually, I said, I think it went exactly as it should have. Inside, I watched as my father was also being escorted out by police. He wasn't in handcuffs either, but the implication was clear. He was being taken in for questioning. As he passed the windows, he saw me. Our eyes met for a long moment. He mouthed something that looked like I'm sorry. But sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't return the trust funds. Sorry didn't erase years of lies. Sorry was just a word people said when they got caught. I turned away from the window. My phone was buzzing constantly now. Text messages and calls coming in as news spread. I scrolled through them quickly. My firm's senior partner asking me to call immediately. Friends wanting to know if the social media posts were real. Reporters somehow already getting my number asking for comments. I turned my phone off. I couldn't deal with any of it right now. Miss Montgomery, a new voice said. I looked up to see Victoria Hayes walking toward me. She was in her mid-40s, dressed professionally but practically. She'd been disguised as catering staff inside, Harrison had said. Now she looked every inch the former FBI investigator she was. Miss Hayes, I acknowledged. I owe you an apology, Victoria said, sitting down on the bench Graham had just vacated. And an explanation. I'd settle for the explanation, I said. Victoria nodded. I was hired by the family of one of your father's investors, a retired couple who lost their life savings. They wanted answers and potentially restitution. When I started investigating, I found a much bigger problem than one bad investment. I found a pattern of fraud going back years. And you contacted me, I said. I thought you deserved to know, Victoria said. You and your brother both. Your trust funds were part of the fraud. You were victims too. But I didn't do anything with the information you gave me, I admitted. I was too scared to even look at the file. I know, Victoria said. That's why Harrison and I had to find another way to force the issue. We needed your mother to confess in a way that couldn't be recanted or hidden. We needed irrefutable proof in front of multiple witnesses. So you orchestrated this entire disaster, I said, gesturing toward the chaos of the restaurant. We orchestrated the exposure, Victoria corrected. Your parents orchestrated the disaster by committing fraud in the first place. We just brought it to light. My life is ruined, I said quietly. My career, my reputation, everything. Your life is honest now, Victoria said firmly. That's not the same as ruined. You were living a lie, Bethany. A comfortable lie, but a lie nonetheless. Now you have the truth. What you build from here will be real. That's easy for you to say, I said. You didn't just lose everything. Actually, Victoria said, I did. 10 years ago, I was married to a man I thought I knew. Turned out he was involved in money laundering. When it came out, I lost my marriage, my home, and nearly lost my career at the Bureau. The only reason I didn't get fired was because I helped build the case against him. I looked at her with new understanding. That's why you do this work now. That's why I do this work now, Victoria confirmed. Because I know what it's like to be blindsided by someone you trust, and I know what it's like to rebuild from nothing. You can do it too, Bethany. It won't be easy, but you can. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. You start by getting through tonight, Victoria said practically. Then you get through tomorrow. Then the next day. Eventually, you'll find your footing. My Uncle Raymond came outside, looking exhausted. He saw me and walked over immediately. Bethany, honey, are you okay? I don't know, I said honestly. Come stay with us tonight, Raymond offered. You shouldn't be alone. I considered it, then shook my head. Thank you, but I think I need to be alone, actually. I need to process all of this. Raymond looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. If you change your mind, call any time, day or night. I will, I promised. My Aunt Diane appeared next. We had no idea, she said, her voice thick with tears. Raymond and we knew Douglas was having a rough quarter, but we never imagined anything like this. None of us did, I said. Your trust fund, Diane continued. We're going to figure out how to help you. Maybe Raymond and I can loan you money to cover your expenses until this is sorted out. I appreciate that, I said, genuinely touched. But I need to figure out how to stand on my own. I've been coasting on family money my whole life. Maybe it's time I learned to actually support myself. Melinda, my cousin, came over and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. This is so insane, she whispered. Are you really okay? I will be, I said, hugging her back. Eventually. The police finished their preliminary interviews and began clearing people out. The restaurant staff looked shell-shocked. This was supposed to be an elegant private party, and it had turned into a crime scene. I felt bad for them, but there was nothing I could do about it. As the crowd dispersed and cars pulled out of the parking lot, I remained on the bench. Harrison stood nearby, still maintaining his professional distance. Victoria had gone to coordinate with the investigators. My phone buzzed again, even though I'd turned it off. The power button must have gotten pressed in my purse. I pulled it out and saw a text from Trevor. It was timestamped from 20 minutes ago. "I'm sorry, Bethany. I couldn't stay and watch it all fall apart. I hope you understand." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. There was nothing to understand. My brother was a coward and a thief who'd abandoned me when I needed family most. That was all I needed to know. Autumn arrived with a crispness in the air that made everything feel new despite being the season of endings. It was early October now, and my life looked nothing like it had in July. I stood in my new studio apartment, so much smaller than the luxury place I'd lived in before, but it was mine, paid for with my own money from my new job. No family wealth, no trust fund, just my own labor. I'd left the big law firm in August. The senior partners had been understanding, technically. They said all the right things about me being a victim and not responsible for my parents' crimes. But I could feel the whispers, the sideways glances, the way certain partners stopped, including me, in high-profile cases. The stain of my family name was too much for a firm that prided itself on prestige and discretion. So I'd left on my own terms before they could ease me out on theirs. I took a job at a nonprofit legal aid organization across town. The pay was 60% less than what I'd been making. My student loans suddenly felt a lot heavier without a six-figure salary backing them up. But the work was meaningful in a way corporate law never had been. I specialized in financial fraud victims now. People like Harrison's sister Margaret, people who'd been scammed or defrauded by people they trusted. I helped them navigate the legal system, file claims, pursue restitution. It was satisfying in a way that negotiating corporate mergers had never been. These people needed my help. They weren't billion-dollar companies with rooms full of lawyers. They were individuals who'd been hurt and needed someone in their corner. My parents were both out on bail awaiting trial. The court date had been set for December. Patricia had been charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Douglas faced securities fraud and running a Ponzi scheme. The evidence against them was overwhelming, according to the prosecutors. Victoria and Harrison had built an airtight case. My parents had tried to reach out multiple times. Letters sent through their lawyers. Phone calls I didn't answer. My mother even showed up at my new apartment once, but I'd refused to open the door. I had nothing to say to them. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear their explanations or apologies. But not yet. Maybe not ever. Trevor had been caught at JFK just as Harrison predicted. He'd been detained before his flight could depart, and he'd been extradited back to face charges of extortion and money laundering. He'd taken a plea deal 2 weeks ago, testifying against both our parents in exchange for a reduced sentence. 3 years in federal prison. He'd be out in 2 with good behavior. Part of me thought I should feel something about that. Sadness, anger, something. But I just felt empty when I thought about Trevor. My baby brother, who I'd loved and protected our whole lives, had turned out to be just as much of a liar as our parents. Maybe worse, because he'd known what they were doing and used it for his own benefit. The family home had been seized as an asset in the restitution case. Douglas's hedge fund had been completely liquidated and was going through bankruptcy proceedings. The 17 victim families would get some money back, but nowhere near what they'd lost. Pennies on the dollar, the lawyers said. It was the best they could do. I'd gotten nothing from my trust fund. It was gone, absorbed into the failed fund and paid out to other investors before the collapse. The prosecutors said I could file a victim impact statement at sentencing, but that money was gone forever. I was starting from zero at age 28. It was terrifying and liberating and lonely. Graham had tried to reconcile once, about a month after everything happened. He'd called and asked to meet for coffee. I'd agreed, mostly out of curiosity. He'd shown up with flowers and apologies, saying he'd made a mistake not telling me about his suspicions. But when I asked him point blank if he'd do anything differently knowing what he knew now, he'd hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I'd wished him well and left. I heard through mutual friends that he was dating someone new already, a banker from his firm whose family had no scandals attached to their name. I was happy for him, in a distant sort of way. We'd been wrong for each other, I could see that now. Built on a foundation of appearances and expectations rather than genuine connection. I'd stayed in touch with Harrison. It started professionally. He'd update me on the case developments, since I was a victim and had the right to know. But then the coffee meetings became less about the case and more about just talking. He understood what it was like to process this kind of betrayal. To rebuild when everything you thought was solid turned out to be smoke. Today we were meeting at a small cafe near my new apartment. I'd just finished a successful case, getting restitution for a client who'd been defrauded by her daughter in a property scam. It was a small victory, but it felt huge. I'd saved someone from the financial ruin my father had caused so many others. Harrison was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He'd learned how I took mine, black with 1 sugar, simple, like my new life. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hey yourself," he replied with a slight smile. "You look good, happy." "I feel good," I said, and realized it was true. Exhausted. My apartment is tiny and my bank account is terrifying. But I feel good. "Good is underrated," Harrison said. "How was court?" "We won," I said, unable to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. Mrs. Patterson got a judgment for the full amount her daughter stole plus interest. It'll take years to collect, but at least there's a legal ruling now. "That's excellent," Harrison said warmly. "Margaret would have liked you." "I wish I could have met her," I said honestly. "She sounds like she was an amazing person." "She was," Harrison agreed, his expression softening. "You remind me of her, actually. The way you're helping people who've been hurt. The way you're finding purpose in the wreckage." "I had a good teacher," I said, meaning him. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping our coffee. Over the past 3 months, these meetings had become something I looked forward to. Harrison was honest in a way most people weren't. He didn't sugarcoat things or try to make me feel better with empty platitudes. But he also saw the person I was becoming rather than just the person I'd been. "Trial date is set," Harrison said after a while. "December 7th. The prosecutors are confident in their case." "Good," I said. I'd been dreading this moment and anticipating it in equal measure. "Are you going to attend?" Harrison asked carefully. It was the question I'd been avoiding answering, even to myself. Did I want to sit in a courtroom and watch my parents be tried for their crimes? Did I want to hear all the details of their fraud laid out in testimony and evidence? "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me thinks I should. To represent the victims, to show that their crimes had real consequences. But another part of me just wants to move on and not look back." "Both instincts are valid," Harrison said. "There's no right answer here, Bethany. You do what feels right for you." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'll be there," Harrison said firmly. "For Margaret, to make sure her story is heard. Victoria's going to testify, and I want to be there to support her testimony." "Of course," I said, "that makes sense." "But that doesn't mean you have to be there," Harrison continued. "Your presence or absence doesn't make you a better or worse person. You've already lost so much. You don't owe anyone your trauma on display in a courtroom." "When did you get so wise?" I asked with a slight smile. "When I spent 6 months processing my sister's death and realizing that grief and justice don't follow neat timelines," Harrison replied. "Everyone heals differently. Everyone processes differently." My phone buzzed with a text. It was from my Uncle Raymond. "Family dinner next Sunday if you're up for it. Small group, just those of us who had nothing to do with the fraud. Would love to see you." I showed the message to Harrison. "What do you think?" "I think family is complicated," he said. "But the ones who showed up for you, who believed you, who didn't blame you, those are the ones worth keeping in your life." "That's about 5 people out of 40, I said dryly. "Quality over quantity," Harrison said with a shrug. I texted back. "Maybe next month." Small steps. "Small steps are still steps forward," Harrison said, echoing words he'd told me before. "You know what's weird?" I said, looking at him over my coffee. 3 months ago, I thought I had everything. Perfect family, perfect job, perfect fiancé, perfect life. "And now?" Harrison prompted. "Now I have almost nothing," I admitted. "Tiny apartment, entry-level nonprofit salary, no family to speak of, no fiancé, no trust fund to fall back on." "But," Harrison said, because he could tell there was more. "But I'm happier," I finished. "Not all the time. Sometimes I wake up panicking about money. Sometimes I miss the comfort of thinking my family was solid. But overall, I'm happier. Because everything I have now is real. It's mine. It's built on truth instead of lies." "That's not nothing," Harrison said quietly. "That's everything." We talked for another hour about nothing in particular, my latest case. His new security contract with a tech executive, the terrible coffee shop music playing overhead. Normal things, easy things. Things that didn't require processing trauma or discussing family betrayal. As we were getting ready to leave, Harrison hesitated. "Bethany, I wanted to ask you something." "Ask away," I said, gathering my things. "When this is all over," he said carefully, "after the trial, after everything is settled, would you want to maybe have dinner sometime? Not as investigator and victim, not as legal colleagues. Just as 2 people who've been through something difficult and came out the other side." I looked at him, really looked at him. Harrison Caldwell, former FBI agent, bodyguard, man who'd lost his sister and spent months seeking justice for her. Man who'd protected me and used me and ultimately given me the truth that shattered my world. Man who'd sat with me through the worst months of my life without expecting anything in return. "I'd like that," I said honestly. "I think I'd like that a lot." His smile was genuine and warm. "Good. Then it's a plan. After the trial." "After the trial," I agreed. Walking home to my tiny studio apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, not quite peace, but something in between. The sense that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward that didn't involve constantly looking back at the wreckage of what used to be. I still had hard days. I still woke up sometimes with panic about money or the future. I still felt the ache of losing my entire family in one night. But I was building something new, something honest, something mine. And that was enough for now. December 7th arrived cold and gray, typical for a Connecticut winter. The federal courthouse was an imposing building downtown, all stone and glass and authority. Media vans lined the street outside. Their satellite dishes pointed skyward. The Montgomery fraud case had garnered significant attention. White-collar crime involving a respected hedge fund manager and his socialite wife made for compelling news coverage. I'd decided 2 weeks earlier that I would attend. Not every day of the trial, but the important moments. Opening statements, key testimonies, sentencing. Harrison had been right that I didn't owe anyone my presence, but I owed it to myself. I needed to see this through, to witness the consequences of my parents' choices. Harrison met me outside the courthouse. He'd offered to accompany me, and I'd gratefully accepted. Victoria was already inside, preparing to testify. The prosecution had built their case largely on her investigative work and the evidence she and Harrison had gathered. "Ready?" Harrison asked, his hand on my elbow in a gesture that was both protective and supportive. "No," I admitted, "but let's go anyway." Inside, the courthouse was packed. I recognized faces from that disastrous birthday party 3 months ago. My Aunt Diane was there with Melinda. My Uncle Raymond sat in the gallery with his wife. But there were also faces I didn't know. 17 families my father had defrauded. 17 sets of victims who deserved to see justice. I saw Harrison's niece, a woman in her early 40s who looked remarkably like the photos I'd seen of Margaret. She was there to represent her aunt's estate. When she saw Harrison, she stood and embraced him tightly. They spoke quietly for a moment, and I gave them space for their grief and their connection. The courtroom itself was formal and intimidating. Wood paneling, high ceilings, the judge's bench elevated and imposing. My parents sat at separate defense tables with their respective legal teams. Patricia had 5 lawyers, Douglas had 6, all of them expensive. All of them paid for by liquidating whatever assets hadn't already been seized. My mother saw me when I entered. Her face crumpled, and she reached toward me instinctively before her lawyer pulled her hand back down. She looked older, thinner. Her usually perfect hair and makeup were subdued and understated. Her lawyers had clearly told her to look sympathetic and remorseful. My father also spotted me. He gave a slight nod, his expression unreadable. He looked exhausted, defeated. The confident hedge fund manager was gone, replaced by someone who knew exactly how badly he'd failed. Trevor was also there, brought in from custody to testify. He'd already taken his plea deal, so his testimony was part of the prosecution's case. When they led him in wearing prison attire, I felt nothing. No sympathy. No residual love. Just emptiness where a brother used to be. The judge entered, and we all stood. The Honorable Catherine Morrison, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for being tough but fair on white-collar criminals. The prosecution and defense took their positions. And then it began. The prosecutor's opening statement was devastating. They outlined the scheme in detail. How Douglas's fund had suffered massive losses in late 2023. How instead of admitting failure and shutting down, he'd used family trust funds to prop up the appearance of solvency. How Patricia had been complicit, moving money and falsifying statements to cover their tracks. How they'd then used new investor money to pay returns to existing investors, creating a classic Ponzi structure. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, the prosecutor said, his voice ringing through the courtroom. This was a sustained, calculated fraud that went on for 18 months. Hundreds of transactions, thousands of lies, millions of dollars stolen from people who trusted Douglas and Patricia Montgomery with their futures. The defense attorneys countered that my father had fully intended to repay the trust funds. That market conditions beyond his control had prevented that. That there was no criminal intent, just poor business decisions made under stress. That Patricia was a devoted wife who'd been trying to save her husband's reputation and didn't understand the legal implications of her actions. It was all nonsense, but they said it with conviction. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended the most significant days. Victoria's testimony was powerful. She walked the jury through her investigation step by step, showing how she'd uncovered the fraud through meticulous analysis of financial records. Harrison's niece testified about Margaret, about her dedication as a teacher, about how she'd trusted Douglas after his presentation at her school district, about how the loss of her retirement had forced her to work herself into an early grave. I cried during that testimony. So did several jurors. 17 other victims gave impact statements. A retired couple who'd lost their home. A single mother who couldn't afford to send her children to college. An elderly man who'd had to move in with his daughter because he could no longer afford his apartment. Each story was heartbreaking. Each one was a life irrevocably changed by my parents' greed and desperation. Trevor's testimony was clinical and damning. He detailed Patricia's confession to him 3 months before the birthday party. He explained how she'd offered him money to stay quiet. He showed emails and text messages where my mother had explicitly acknowledged the fraud and begged him not to tell anyone. His testimony removed any doubt about her knowledge and intent. When it was Patricia's turn to potentially testify in her own defense, her lawyers advised against it. She didn't take the stand. She'd already confessed in front of 40 witnesses at the birthday party. There was nothing she could say now that would help her case. Douglas did testify. He tried to paint himself as a victim of circumstance, a good man who'd made desperate choices under impossible pressure. He admitted taking the trust fund money but claimed he'd fully intended to return it. He denied knowing about Patricia's falsified statements, though the prosecution produced evidence of emails between them that suggested otherwise. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty, both of them, on every charge. Sentencing came a week later. I attended that too. The courtroom was packed again, this time with a different energy. Not the curiosity of a trial, but the gravity of consequences. Judge Morrison did not mince words. She addressed Douglas first. "Mr. Montgomery, you were in a position of trust. People gave you their life savings, believing you would manage it responsibly. Instead, you stole from your own children and used client money to cover your losses. This was not a mistake. This was a crime. And it deserves significant consequences." She sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole before serving at least 10. The courtroom gasped. 12 years. My father would be 72 when he got out. If he lived that long. Patricia was next. "Mrs. Montgomery, you enabled and concealed your husband's crimes. You terrorized your own daughter to protect your secrets. You stole from your family and lied for years. While I believe your husband bears the greater responsibility as the fund manager, you were a willing and active participant." 8 years for Patricia. She'd be 65 when released. Both of them would leave prison with nothing. No assets, no retirement, no life to return to. Restitution was ordered. Every asset they had would be liquidated and distributed to victims. Their pensions, Patricia's remaining jewelry, everything. It still wouldn't come close to making the victims whole, but it was something. Trevor had already been sentenced to 3 years under his plea deal. With good behavior, he'd be out in 2. He'd testified against our parents to reduce his own sentence, and I knew I'd never forgive him for that betrayal. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse in the cold December air. Media swarmed, but Harrison and courthouse security kept them away from me. I wasn't giving statements. I wasn't answering questions. I was just there to witness justice being served. My Aunt Diane approached carefully. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," I said, and it was mostly true. "It's over, finally. Your mother asked if you'd come see her before she's transferred to begin her sentence," Diane said gently. "She said she needs to talk to you." I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to say no, to walk away and never look back. But another part, a smaller part, wanted some kind of closure. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "That's all anyone can ask," Diane replied. Harrison's niece came over, her eyes red from crying. "Thank you," she said to me, "for being here, for supporting the prosecution. I know it couldn't have been easy. I'm sorry for what my family did to your aunt," I said. "She deserved so much better." "She did," the woman agreed. "But she would have liked you, I think. She always believed in redemption, in people choosing to be better than their circumstances." "I'm trying," I said quietly. "That's all she'd ask," the woman said. She turned to Harrison. "Uncle Harry, let's go lay flowers at her grave. Tell her justice was served." Harrison looked at me. "Will you be okay?" "I'll be fine," I assured him. "Go be with your family." He squeezed my hand briefly, then left with his niece. I watched them walk away, two people bound by grief and love for someone they'd lost. I stood there for a while longer, watching the courthouse empty. Eventually, I walked to a small park nearby. There was a memorial bench there that Harrison had told me about. It had been installed 2 months ago, dedicated to Margaret Caldwell and all victims of financial fraud. I sat on the bench and pulled out my phone. There were dozens of messages. Friends checking in, my Uncle Raymond inviting me to Christmas dinner, my law firm colleagues congratulating me on seeing the trial through, and one from my mother, sent through her lawyer. "Please come see me before I leave. I need you to understand. Please, Bethany." I stared at the message for a long time. Did I need to hear her explanations? Did I need her understanding or apologies? Would it change anything? I didn't know. Maybe someday I'd be ready for that conversation. But not today. Not now. I deleted the message without responding. Instead, I texted Harrison. "Thank you for everything. For protecting me. For showing me the truth. For helping me find solid ground." His response came quickly. "You did the hard work yourself. I just walked beside you for part of the journey. That's what you do for people you care about," I typed back, echoing his words from months ago. "Yes," he replied, "it is." I sat on Margaret's memorial bench as the December sun set early, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from my boss at the legal aid organization. "Proud of you for getting through today. Take tomorrow off if you need it. When you're ready, we have 3 new clients who need your help." 3 new clients. 3 more people who'd been defrauded or scammed. 3 more chances to help someone avoid the devastation my father had caused. I typed back, "I'll be there tomorrow, ready to work." Because that's what I did now. I helped people. I fought for justice. I built something real from the ashes of my family's lies. My mother had announced I was dead to them at my father's birthday party. She'd been right in a way. The old Bethany, the one who'd trusted blindly and believed in perfect families, she had died that night. But something new had been born. Someone who saw clearly, who valued truth over comfort, who knew that family wasn't just blood, but honesty and showing up when it mattered. I'd lost my parents, my brother, my fiancé, my trust fund, and my old life. But I'd found myself. I'd found purpose. I'd found Harrison and Victoria and a new understanding of what it meant to do meaningful work. And sitting there on that memorial bench, watching the sun set on the day my parents were sentenced to prison, I felt something unexpected. Not happiness exactly, not peace, but acceptance. And maybe, just maybe, the earliest seeds of hope. Sometimes family betrays you in the worst ways possible. Sometimes the people you trust most turn out to be the ones hurting you. But you survive. You rebuild. You find new ground and new people and new purpose. And sometimes, that's enough. I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you ever discovered that the people you trusted most were lying to you all along? How did you handle it? What would you have done in my situation? I shared this story because I know I'm not alone in experiencing family betrayal. If you've been through something similar, if you've had to rebuild after losing everything you thought was solid, please leave a comment below. Your story matters. Your experience could help someone else who's going through the same thing. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel or reflect on your own relationships, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics, betrayal, and survival. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in dealing with complicated family situations. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here with me through the hardest period of my life. I hope that wherever you are, whatever you're dealing with, you find the strength to choose truth over comfortable lies. I hope you find solid ground. And I hope you remember that sometimes losing everything is the first step to finding yourself. Take care of yourselves, value honesty, and remember that the family you choose can be more real than the one you're born into. Until next time.